Welcome to Conversational with Carrie Olsen. I'm Carrie. You've heard my voice on HBO Max, Disney Plus, Grammarly, and the MTV Movie and TV Awards, which is funny because I used to be terrified of what people thought of my voice. About me in general, really. I was exhausted from replaying conversations over and over in my head. Did I say something wrong? What did they really think? I was wasting so much mental energy obsessing over what I thought people thought about me. When I got into voiceover, I knew that the more authentic I was behind the microphone, the better I would be at my work. But I was surprised when that started spilling over into everything else. I stopped trying so hard to micromanage other people's experience of me and started learning how to just show up as myself. In this podcast, we talk about how the skills that make you better at voice acting also make you better at life. Let's get conversational. Welcome to Season 2 of Conversational with Carrie Olsen. Voice actors receive more real-time feedback than almost any other profession. In a single recording session, you know what you're in for. You signed up for it. Sometimes it's one voice actor behind the microphone and a room full of people on the other side of the glass or in your headphones giving you constant adjustments and feedback. Sometimes that feedback is pretty simple, and sometimes it's more complex. One of my favorite bits of direction that I've ever gotten in a recording session is, can you give that line to me in a whisper voice, but don't whisper? And we have to integrate that feedback instantly while maintaining our creative flow. But something I've learned through my years of doing voiceover is that taking that constant direction doesn't just make us better voice actors. It actually prepares us for every other area of life where taking feedback is important, which is pretty much every area. So today we're diving into the psychology of taking direction, and more importantly, how to get systematically better at it. Because whether you're a voice actor and trying to get better at doing your job well, or you're anyone else who ever gets feedback from anyone else, this skill of being able to take and integrate feedback is priceless. Because whether you're a voice actor getting directed in the booth, or you're a freelance designer presenting concepts to clients, you're a consultant who needs to implement some changes, or honestly just a human navigating human relationships, your ability to receive and integrate feedback determines how successful you'll be. Most people have a terrible relationship with feedback. Research from the Harvard Business Review showed that 69% of managers avoid giving feedback because they're afraid of how it's going to be received. And when feedback is given, our brains literally process that as a physical threat. Dr. Matthew Lieberman's research at UCLA showed that when people receive criticism, the same brain regions activate as when they experience physical pain. Your brain literally can't tell the difference between that take needs a little bit more energy and you're being chased by a predator. This is why most people either get defensive or completely shut down when they receive direction. But as voice actors, we can't afford to do either one of those things. We have to process feedback quickly, we have to integrate it immediately, and we have to do it all while maintaining our creative flow and while staying connected to the material. So we develop what I call feedback integration skills out of necessity. And these skills just happen to be incredibly valuable outside the booth as well. So to give you a personal example, I have been working on taking direction better from my husband. My husband, Derek, works in the business with me, and obviously we work together in our family as well. And I realized that sometimes when Derek makes suggestions, especially about something that maybe I'd already put thought into, I sometimes would treat his input like criticism instead of collaboration. I was getting defensive about things that weren't even criticisms. So voice acting has taught me that when everyone involved has the same goal, so in our case, that's having a successful business and family, then all criticism is just constructive collaboration. And it's the exact same mindset in the booth, which we're going to get into in a little bit more detail here. The client and I both want the project to succeed. So their direction isn't personal judgment, it's shared problem solving. Here's what voice actors have to learn that most people don't. Taking direction is a skill you can systematically improve. You can get better at it. It's not just a personality trait that you're stuck with or not. Voice actors develop 3 specific capabilities that transfer everywhere. The first one sounds intense, but it's actually pretty simple. It's called rapid emotional regulation. When a client shows that they're not quite on board with the direction you're going in a recording session, we can't spend 5 minutes processing our feelings about it. We have to reset our emotional state in real time and then try a different approach. This requires what psychologists call cognitive reappraisal, instantly reframing feedback as information rather than judgment. And I actually practice this with my kids a lot too. We're working on keeping a calm face, voice, and body when we receive any type of correction. But obviously, I need to model this myself too. When Derek suggests a different approach to something, I use the same emotional reset that I use in sessions. Acknowledge the input, breathe, reshape it as collaboration, and then implement. The second capability that voice actors develop is getting to the core of what clients really need. Put really simply, this is just empathy. Voice actors need to develop the ability to put themselves in the other person's shoes and proceed from that perspective. And this is actually an acting skill, understanding the client's goals, needs, and vision so that you can serve their needs rather than just following instructions. The client might say, we need more energy in this take. But when you step into their perspective, you realize the delivery sounds too corporate for their brand. They want warmth and approachability instead of a read that sounds a little bit too businessy. This empathetic skill transfers everywhere. Understanding what your boss is really trying to achieve with their feedback, recognizing what your partner needs when they make a request, seeing client projects from their business perspective rather than just your creative one. And the third capability that voice actors develop is implementation without ego attachment. This is the big one. Voice actors learn to separate their creative choices from their identity. When a client line reads you, which means they tell you exactly the way that they want you to read every single word, you don't take it as artistic rejection. You implement their vision because the project's success matters more than you feeling creatively fulfilled in that particular moment. I'm actually working on this in business delegation. I have so many uncompleted, half-baked plans because I want my fingers in everything instead of just trusting my team to do their job and implement. Voice acting has taught me that sometimes the director, whether that's a client or Derek managing our business operations, has a vision that's different from mine, but still totally valid. The skill is learning when to advocate for your perspective and when to say, okay, and implement someone else's approach. So how do you get systematically better at direction taking? Here's the framework I use that's worked for years inside the booth and outside the booth as well. Step 1 is the mindset foundation. And this is so huge. It's so transformational in the booth. But this is the one that I noticed had the biggest impact on my life outside the booth in regular, everyday situations as well. Before you think about any type of technique, you have to have the right mental framework. This has 3 parts. First is knowing and believing and living in the truth that you're capable of doing this job. This confidence should be earned through training and also supported by the fact that you've booked other jobs before in the past, or just the fact that you had the skills to book this particular job in the first place. Believe that you belong in that session. You can't afford to go into a session insecure. The second part of having the right mental framework is believing that the client has your best interest in mind. They're not out to hurt you. They want a great end product, which means they actually want you to sound as amazing as you possibly can, because that helps them get the end product that they want. You're on the same team and you're working toward the same goal. The third part is to go into every session expecting to collaborate. Each piece of direction doesn't just move the project one step closer to perfection, it gives you another opportunity to exercise your creativity. This mindset shift changes everything about how you receive and process direction. You move from defensive to curious, and from threatened to energized. Okay, step 2 on learning how to systematically get better at taking direction. Step 2 is clarify the goal. A lot of times this is pretty obvious based on what the product is, who the client is, or what their brand is, but it's always good to make sure that you're on the same page. Because if you have a particular vision for the end product and the client has a different particular vision for the end product, you're going to be clashing a whole lot, and that is not going to be fun. So if it isn't clear to you from the specs, or the client didn't explain it to you at the beginning of the session, which sometimes they do, they'll say, this is what we're going for this particular campaign or product, then it's always good to ask some clarifying questions to make sure that you're on the same page. You can ask for some specifics around tone, and a lot of times listening to the music that's going to be going along with the spot does a whole lot to help with this. Most feedback problems come from misaligned understanding of what success looks like. So voice actors learn to ask for details about tone, or what's the main message that you want to land. For freelancers, you might say, help me understand what success looks like for this revision. For team collaboration, what's the outcome we're trying to achieve? For relationships, what would feel most helpful to you right now? This shifts the conversation away from your way versus my way to our shared goal and how to reach it. Step 3 is implement first, evaluate later, if ever. This is counterintuitive, but voice actors learn to try the direction first before they start judging whether or not they think it will work. Often what sounds wrong in theory actually feels really right in practice. I'm trying this right now with business suggestions from Derek. So when he gives a suggestion, I'm trying to stay open long enough to consider it instead of immediately shutting it down because my brain is going through all the reasons why it wouldn't work. In the booth, this is extremely important because you have to have your creative hat on and not your editing or your judging hat, because that stalls your creativity. And this totally reminds me of the improv rule, yes and. So when you do get feedback from a client, remember that we're viewing it as an opportunity to show creativity and not as negative feedback. And before we immediately shut it down or start thinking about all the reasons that it won't work or think about how you would do it differently, we immediately say yes. And then you internalize the feedback. You go back to that empathy piece. You internalize the feedback. You do whatever magic needs to happen inside of you to turn that feedback into output. And then you deliver the next take, having integrated that feedback. Taking direction can be an absolute dream when everything is going well and things are flowing and you're on the same page. But sometimes it is not that fun. Sometimes it can be a little uncomfortable. Maybe the feedback feels unfair, or maybe it contradicts your personal judgment. Like, I disagree with that. I would not read that way. Or maybe the communication style with which it's delivered doesn't feel good. And sometimes direction is just confusing. Voice actors face this constantly. Sometimes clients give line readings that feel artistically limiting. Sometimes the direction contradicts what you know about good communication. But a humbling reality is that a lot of times resistance to feedback is more about my ego than it is about the quality of the feedback itself. If everyone involved in the project genuinely wants the project to succeed, then all feedback, even clumsy feedback, is an attempt at constructive collaboration. This doesn't mean accepting abusive feedback or abandoning your professional boundaries. It means approaching feedback with curiosity and not getting defensive about it. Genuinely asking the questions, what are we trying to achieve here, and how can I help the project get there? Sometimes that means implementing direction that isn't your first choice. But the project isn't about you. It's about achieving the shared goal. And it always starts with assuming positive intent and focusing on shared goals. So here's your implementation challenge for this week. Pick one relationship or work context where you typically struggle with getting feedback. It might be your boss or a client, a family member, or maybe even your own internal critic. And then practice the 2-second reset. Before responding to any direction or feedback from this person, pause for 2 seconds and reset your emotional state. Then practice clarifying the goal. What outcome are you looking for? Or help me understand what success looks like. And finally, try implementing first and evaluating later, if ever. Instead of immediately analyzing why the suggestion won't work, try implementing it for a specified amount of time and see how it goes. And document what happens. How does the relationship change when you approach the feedback as collaboration rather than criticism? What do you learn about yourself and your resistance patterns? If you want additional resources for practicing feedback integration skills, including some techniques that I use specifically for voice acting, but that transfer to other areas as well, text VOICE to 55444. You can also visit carrieolsenvo.com/taking-direction to get the resources there, and you can also leave me a voice message about your own experiences with taking direction that I might just feature in a future episode. The ability to take direction well isn't just about being agreeable or being accommodating. It's about being secure enough in your own competence that you can integrate other people's perspectives without feeling threatened. Voice actors develop this security out of necessity. We have to stay creative and confident while receiving constant feedback. But these skills serve us everywhere, in client relationships, in leadership roles, in business, even in personal relationships. Remember, your ability to integrate feedback determines how far you'll go in any field. Approach direction as collaboration and not criticism, and see how much faster you grow. I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in to Conversational with Carrie Olsen. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for new episodes. For today's resources and to stay connected, text VOICE to 55444. I'll see you next week.